All right, guys, how's it going? It's me again, Miss Christopherson, in case you were wondering. And what you guys have learned about yesterday is that we talked a little bit as far as what's going on with photosynthesis. Okay, hopefully, you guys remember that they take in sunlight energy, carbon dioxide, water, and what they do is they end up making glucose, and that glucose is their food source. So what I want you guys to do is think about photosynthesis as like you guys rolling up in the kitchen, whipping up a nice fancy meal. Pow! You got this delicious sandwich in front of you, right? Imagine that sandwich is like being glucose. So once you have the sandwich, what do you got to do with it, right? You're going to eat it to get energy from it, all right? And that's essentially the second step here that we're going to talk about today. It's a process called cell respiration, all right? Cell respiration. So, what is the purpose of cell respiration? The whole point of cell respiration, sorry about that, is basically we're going to take that glucose, that sandwich, and we're going to break it down into ATP, which is the technical term of what we're going to break it down into. But basically, all that it is, guys, is it's a usable form of energy inside of our body. All right. If we didn't have cell respiration and we were eating food, it would just simply pass right straight through. Okay. There would be no point to it. All right, so again, we're taking this gross looking hamburger. Yeah, it looks disgusting. There's our glucose. And what we're doing is we're making ATP. Now, if you guys think back to our biochem notes, ATP is a nucleic acid. All right, and nucleic acids have that phosphate inside of it. So not only you're going to find it in meats and things like that, pretty much you can find glucose in everything. So again, what we're doing is that we're breaking down the glucose into a usable form of energy. The glucose was made again in photosynthesis. Okay. All right. So a summative equation for this. All right. So what we need here, obviously, I just told you the first one. So the first thing that we have to have for cell respiration is we have to have glucose. We got to have that sandwich. Okay. So that is going to be our very first thing. Now, the second thing is a big part right here, which kind of confuses some of you guys because it's called cell respiration. And when you hear respiration, you think of breathing. And when you think of breathing, hopefully, you think of oxygen. And oxygen is actually going to be a huge component of this whole process. We're not going to talk so much about it today. It's going to be more so the notes tomorrow. But oxygen is a huge component in this. This is why we call it cell respiration. One of the many reasons why oxygen is so important for us. Okay? So we have our glucose, our food. We have our oxygen in which we inhale through respiration. And what are we going to make? Okay, we're going to make carbon dioxide. All right, carbon dioxide is a big thing. This is going to be something that will be in the lesson tomorrow. So we have carbon dioxide. We're going to have water. All right. And obviously, one thing that I told you in the previous slide, the whole point of this is to take glucose and break it down into a usable form of energy, which we call ATP. Okay. So carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. So again, just make sure that you remember reactants and products. The EOC loves these things, okay? They can ask you which of the following is a product of cell respiration. And actually, I'm going to ask you that too, okay? So that is the summative equation using words. So the one underneath it in your notes, you guys have summative equation using the formulas, okay? So what we're going to do here is we're just going to put those in there. The formula for glucose is, hopefully we know it by now, C6H12O6. Okay, the formula for oxygen is going to be O2. Formula for carbon dioxide is going to be CO2. Water is H2O. And ATP is just plain and simple ATP. Okay, here are reactants and here are going to be our products. Okay. Kind of cool stuff. So again, you have to memorize these equations. All right, and actually, if you think about it, which I know is hard sometimes, but if you think about it, it makes sense. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about ATP. What is going on with it? And we're not going to spend a lot of time with this. It's kind of a crime how little I am talking about it. But what does ATP stand for? Okay, ATP is going to stand for something known as adenosine triphosphate, and this tri is a big one. So when you guys write this down, adenosine triphosphate, if you could circle the tri in there, okay? So AT is represented by adenosine triphosphate, okay? Again, circle the tri, please, circle the tri, okay? Now, anytime you hear me say ATP, well, actually, let's talk about the components of it. All right, the structure of it is that it's going to contain a structure known as adenosine, okay, which is actually going to be this orange part right here. This is the part that's going to have some nitrogen inside of it. I will never ask you this, okay? I'm going to tell you what I will ask you. It's going to have a sugar, which is this pink piece, okay? And the most important thing is that it's going to have 3 phosphates, okay? So when you write down the 3 phosphates, circle that, underline it, and make that stick out in some way, shape, or form, okay? It's called triphosphate because there are 3 phosphates, okay? And you can see them right here, 1, 2, 3, all right? 3 phosphate groups, okay? So that's what it's going to contain. Again, underline the 3 phosphates. That's the most important thing. Now, anytime you hear ATP, what I want you to do is in terms of energy, does it have energy? The answer is yes, it sure does. Okay, it definitely, definitely, definitely does. Okay. All right, now we did some talk about ADP. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to skip all that. Okay, so let's skip the ADP and let's hop on down to I can't believe I'm skipping all that, but I'm going to, okay? Let's hop to where you have anaerobic respiration in your notes, okay? Where is that at? Anaerobic respiration. I don't think I have it up here anymore. All right, so we're going to flip to the back, all right? So let's flip to the back under anaerobic respiration, okay? All right, so what is anaerobic respiration, okay? Anaerobic respiration is basically going to be respiration that occurs without oxygen, okay? Now, I know that you guys had oxygen as one of your reactants for cell respiration. This is a little reaction that's going to take place where it's not necessary. You're going to see oxygen, like I said earlier, come into play in what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So it's going to be respiration that occurs without oxygen. Oftentimes, we refer to this as fermentation, okay, which is also something that we're going to talk about, okay? So anaerobic, no oxygen, okay? And that's actually a way that you can make it short in your notes. All right, so the organisms that actually undergo anaerobic respiration, what's really cool about this is every single living thing in the world undergoes this process, okay? So from us to tiny little bacteria that's thriving inside of our tummy is actually undergoing this process, okay? Which is pretty awesome if you think about it, because we're pretty complex and bacteria are fairly simple, but yet we both are undergoing this process right now as we speak, okay? So every single living thing will undergo this, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. Now, for this one right here, guys, I didn't give you a whole lot of room to write descriptions, so we're going to get creative, okay? And I'm going to kind of tell you where to write things. It's going to be crammed, but hopefully we can make it work, all right? So if you guys notice, I have simple, like this is all bacteria right here. These are going to be our simple organisms. And actually, instead of writing it up above it, could you guys write simple organisms underneath, okay? So write simple organisms like bacteria and yeast underneath this picture. Or actually, forget the simple organisms, just simply write bacteria and yeast. Yeast is a fungus, all right? And we're actually going to talk about how they undergo this process, all right? So these are all the simple guys, all right? On this side, the zebra is actually going to be representing complex organisms, and just simply write that under the zebra. Put complex organisms underneath, all right? So I'm going to show you, I told you this happens in every single living thing, but obviously we're going to kind of diverge at one point in time. So that's why I have both these guys up here, okay? All right, so first thing that we're going to do here, and I don't care where you write this, in between, and actually to make you guys not write stuff, where we are going to be drawing stuff in between here, okay? You guys can write some of these descriptions kind of off to the side right here. Like I said, you got to get creative, okay? You can kind of cram it in certain areas. I'm sorry that I didn't give you the 1, 2, 3, 4 like I did with the photosynthesis, all right? But make sure that you're doing all that, all right? So again, we're going to put stuff right here in the middle, cram explanations in around that, okay? All right, so first thing here is that, boop, 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 boop. All right, let's put a number 1 somewhere, all right, that all organisms have glucose in its cell, okay? So basically they can produce it in photosynthesis or consumed in their food. So basically what I'm saying here, if you want to know how to make this short, is we need glucose, all right? So number 1, we have to have glucose. We have it inside of our cells, we eat something, or if you're plants, you already made it through photosynthesis. Now plants are going to be undergoing this one as well. That's another misconception, is that a lot of kids think that plants just undergo photosynthesis and that consumers, us, undergo cell respiration. Not the case, all right? So an organism has glucose. You get it through eating, have it inside of your cells, or you just made it, okay? Way to make that one short. So let's go ahead and draw that in the center of these things. If you guys notice, I just drew an arrow, put glucose. Now how I'm representing glucose, if you guys remember, the formula is C6H12O6. If you think back to your photosynthesis, the one thing that we really like there were those carbons, because it's those carbons that come together from carbon dioxide to make up the matter of those plants, okay? So here we're just going to focus on the carbon. There are O's and H's all around here. I don't care about them. I care about this, which is the backbone of it, okay? Kind of like the spine of glucose. All right, notice it's C6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? So if you guys you have this inside of your body right now from lunch, okay? All right, so what's going to happen here is I want you guys to go ahead and draw this, okay? So you got your glucose. Let's draw an arrow down, and let's write down pyruvate. Pyruvate is basically going to be this structure right here and this structure right here, okay? So this is one structure of something called pyruvate. This is the other one. It's 2, 3 carbon structures, okay? Now the question here is where did it come from? All right, where did it come from? And actually, guys, I'm going to back up a little bit. If you want to, you can put a number 1 right here by this glucose to match up with this description that you guys just wrote down right there. You can put a number 1, okay? And you can put a number 2 right here by this pyruvate if you would like, okay? So here's the question. What did I do to that glucose? This was glucose, now it's this. What did I do to it, okay? And it's pretty simple. If you guys notice, looks like I just broke that baby in half, right? Snap, like snapping a pencil in half. That's exactly what happened, okay? So for number 2, let's just simply put down that glucose is broken in half, you can say that, into 2, 3 carbon pieces called pyruvate, okay? So just snip it in half. We have 2 separate pieces. We call both of those pyruvate, and that was originally glucose. We can't call it glucose anymore because it's something different, okay? Just snapped it in half. All right? Now, there's a lot more to this as well. I'm giving you very superficial version of this, okay? Very, very, very simplified, all right? But hopefully you can get the gist of it, okay? All right. Now, the thing with this glucose, the reason why we're going to get energy from it is because it is jam-packed full of energy, okay? And all those bonds holding those carbons together are jammed full of tons of energy, which actually ended up coming from the sunlight, okay? So I broke one of those bonds. I got rid of that guy right there. So when I get rid of that guy right there, we have a release of energy, okay? A burst of energy. And when you guys think of energy, I want you to think of ATP. So what we do right here is that we generate an ATP right there, okay? Now, as far as how that happens, it gets into some crazy stuff. And if you ever want to know about it, just send me an email and we'll talk about it, okay, in some way, shape, or form. But for right now, whenever you see any of these bonds broken here, I want you to think that ATP is actually going to be made, okay? So we made ATP, all right? So you put ATP on that arrow right there, and let's put a number 3 beside that, okay? Put a number 3 beside that, all right? So what we're going to put down here is energy from the breaking of glucose is used to make ATP, okay? It's used to make ATP. You don't really need to know the how. If you want to know the how, you can go talk to Miss Witzenberg. She'll tell you the how. Doc Raymond will tell you the how, or send me an email and I'll explain the how in an email, okay? So energy from breaking the glucose is used to make ATP, okay? And this is energy. You guys are using this right now, believe it or not. Some of you down in the back with your heads down sleeping, which is not cool. If I were there, I'd whack you up beside your head. Just, I'm not kidding. All right? Just saying. But anytime you see ATP, you just sitting there taking notes, you're actually using ATP, okay? And this, again, is happening on a cellular level, you guys, okay? All right. So, actually, I want to hop back here, okay? And I'm going to hop to your notes. And actually, what I want you guys to do, where you wrote right here, organisms that undergo anaerobic respiration, I also want you put every living thing there, and I want you to put that it takes place in the cytoplasm, okay? If you don't know how to spell that, takes place in, that's so small for you guys, okay? It's going to take place in the cytoplasm. I forgot to put that up there. So cytoplasm is cytoplasm, okay? So the cytoplasm is the fluid inside of the cells. Everything is going to have cytoplasm. So right up here, you guys simply put down all living things occurs in cytoplasm. I always forget to add that to these notes. Okay? All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about what are we going to do with this pyruvate, okay? And actually, before we go there, Ms. Hartsock, if you can hit pause, let's give them a short 2-minute break to stretch, get their heads up off the desk, and then we'll come back to it. So go ahead and hit pause, please. All right. So now that we have this pyruvate here, okay, we have two separate organisms. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do different things with this pyruvate. This whole process right here is basically anaerobic respiration, guys. That's it. Very simple. You cut glucose in half, make ATP. That's it. A lot simpler than the stuff we talked about yesterday, okay? But what do we do with it, all right? So when we talk about complex organisms, the explanation here is that the ATP, that one ATP that we made in anaerobic respiration, is not enough energy to sustain us, okay? We need a lot more ATP in our body, all right, to allow us to sit there and stare at a PowerPoint and take notes, okay? You might not feel like you need a lot of energy, but you do, all right? So this is under explanation. So the ATP in anaerobic isn't enough, so we need more, and that's a way to make that shorter so you're not a robot writing down everything word for word. Like all these people jumping around. You need energy to do that, okay? So what's the result of this? Because we need more energy, what we're going to do is that we're going to take that pyruvate and we're going to ship it to an organelle that you just took a test on that is better known as the powerhouse of the cell. Anybody remember what that is? Where energy is made, the powerhouse of the cell. And what that is the mitochondria, okay? So in a result, let's just simply say that the pyruvate is sent to the mitochondria, okay, to make more ATP, plain and simple. And that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, okay? So that pyruvate is going to be sent to the mitochondria. Now, what's cool here is that in those simple organisms, why do they not send things to their mitochondria? Because they don't have one, okay? They don't have them. So it's impossible for them to do that. And this whole process is called aerobic respiration, which again is what we're going to discuss tomorrow. All right, so pyruvate sent to the mitochondria so it can be broken down into more ATP. I know this is crazy stuff, okay? All right, so for example, what we're going to add to our diagram, and I know you wrote something under the zebra, but basically if you're a complex organism, this zebra is going to eat some food, get that glucose, break it in half. This is taking place in the cytoplasm of its cell, make that pyruvate, which generates an ATP, and they're going to send this off to the mitochondria, okay? Ship it off. All right, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So if you guys could, please put to the mitochondria for this one, okay? All right, so let's talk about the simple guys, okay? The simple organisms have a completely different story, okay? So explanation for your simple organisms, that's bacteria and yeast, okay, which you already have written that one down. So their explanation is that ATP that we made, all right, in breaking down that glucose into pyruvate is plenty of energy for them. They are a single cell. They are the simplest organisms that are out there. If they had as much energy as we do, goodness gracious, God knows what would happen, okay? So that ATP that is generated is enough. They don't need any more, okay? So they're sitting on this pyruvate, right? So the question is what do you do with stuff that you don't need anymore? What do you guys do with it? You throw it away, all right? And that's essentially what these guys are going to be doing. All right, so the ATP made in anaerobic respiration is plenty of energy. They don't need any more, okay? So a quick way to summarize that. All right, so what's going to be the result? The result is that the pyruvate's broken down into waste, okay? Please, please, please make sure that in some way, shape, or form you write fermentation, underline it, put a square around it, okay? That's a big one. All right, so pyruvate is broken down into waste. It's trash. We call this fermentation. Okay, so like this little thing there, they're like, see you later in the trash. All right, so that's called fermentation. Now, there are two types of fermentation, and you guys are actually familiar with both of these, even though you don't know it. Okay, all right. Well, before we get to that, let's hop back to our diagram. So let's say you're a simple organism. They still need to consume. They still need to eat. So they're going to take that glucose, break it in half into pyruvate, make that ATP, that's enough energy for them, and then it's going to go to fermentation, which is basically getting rid of it as trash. It's waste, okay? So that's right there, okay? All right. So let's talk about the different types of fermentation, okay, the different types. So let's hop to lactic acid fermentation under explanation. Why don't you guys just simply put down this is the first type, is that the pyruvate's broken down into lactic acid. You don't have to put a waste product, okay? Pyruvate is broken down into lactic acid, okay? Pyruvate's broken down into lactic acid. It's basically a waste product, okay? So a lot of you guys are like, lactic acid, what the heck is that? All right. What this basically is, an example of this, is just simply put down yogurt, okay? I know everybody in here has had yogurt, hopefully at some point in time in their life. If not, please give it a shot at some point in time. Yogurt's pretty freaking cool. If you guys eat it, you've noticed that it's kind of tangy, has like a slight tang to it. That slight tang is actually going to be the lactic acid, which is pretty cool. So what's going on in yogurt? If you were to actually read on the side of a container of yogurt, it actually has live active cultures of bacteria. Lactic acid fermentation is very common in bacteria. So what you have in there is you got milk, you got sugar. What this bacteria is doing is they're actually taking that sugar in that yogurt, breaking it right here into this pyruvate, generating energy for them. And what makes the yogurt taste bitter is basically this fermentation process where they're taking this pyruvate and converting it into that bitter tasting sour thing, tangy thing called lactic acid, all right, which is really pretty cool. You can find some yogurt that has, dear God, like 10 different cultures of bacteria. And that's why yogurt's so good for you, because we got bacteria inside of our tummy that helps us basically digest things, okay? So our example is basically just going to be yogurt. All right, pretty cool stuff, okay? All right, the next one is actually, we also have sore muscles. Everybody in here hopefully has had a sore muscle. If you haven't, you need to get out and play a little bit, all right, just saying. But sore muscles are actually due to lactic acid buildup inside of us. And why does that happen? That's actually something we're going to talk about tomorrow. That's pretty cool, okay? All right, so let's talk about the other type of fermentation. This is called alcohol fermentation, okay? So let's just simply put down alcohol. The explanation of that one is where the pyruvate is going to be broken down into two things. I have up here ethanol. You guys can just simply put down alcohol and carbon dioxide. That makes me happy, okay? So the pyruvate is broken down into ethanol or alcohol and carbon dioxide, both of these things. Now, there's one use of this that you should be familiar with, and another one that you should not be familiar with until you are of a particular age, okay? Now, if you take a look at this one, basically, this is going to be taking place with yeast, which is kind of cool. Yeast is a fungus, okay? All right, so let's talk about how this one happens, okay, or some examples. The first one is actually baking bread, fresh bread, homemade bread. So in your examples, you guys can simply put down homemade bread, okay, or anything that's homemade for that matter that involves yeast in some way, shape, or form. So it could be biscuits, it could be tortillas, it could be pita, okay, anything that involves yeast, all right? Here's what's so cool if you guys have anybody around you who bakes. So what you do is the basic ingredients, and I'm going to screw this up because I'm not a baker, my husband's the baker, is typically you got flour, you got yeast, you got sugar, okay? You put all those things together, all right, and you make a little dough ball, all right? Everybody in here has hopefully seen a dough ball at some point in time. Well, when you put those things together, basically, and actually I have a little animation for you guys, okay? So once you have your little dough ball, which there's a dough ball inside of here, you let it sit, okay? And what you'll see is literally what you see in this picture right here is you'll see it get closer to that edge of the bucket, okay? Do you see it getting bigger and bigger and bigger? That's dough, that's moving. What's happening there is basically the yeast is consuming that sugar and it's producing carbon dioxide, which is causing it to rise, okay? So again, it's taking that glucose, breaking it down into the pyruvate. It says, hey, I don't need any pyruvate, and then breaks that pyruvate down into carbon dioxide, which is what's causing it to rise like this. There's actually also going to be ethanol in there and alcohol. If you ever smell dough, it actually sometimes smells like alcohol, okay? Does that mean that you can eat some dough and get drunk? I actually had a kid ask me that before. No, okay? If you eat too much of it, it's going to make you sick. But basically, it's really kind of a cool process. You're seeing basically anaerobic respiration taking place right there, okay? When you bake it, obviously the alcohol evaporates. They say all the holes that you see inside of the bread right here are going to actually be like kind of the air pockets where the carbon dioxide was. Okay, kind of cool stuff. All right. Another one is actually making beer, wine, champagne, liquor, all right, alcohol fermentation, all right, which that's essentially what it is. So in your notes, you can put down making beer, wine, alcohol, okay? Is going to be pretty much the exact same thing here. Yeast is used for this. When you start off, you got yeast, you got things like hops, depending on what you're making for beer. If it's beer, obviously it's hops. If it's wine, you're going to have grapes. And they take the sugars from those things and actually undergo the fermentation. But in this case, we trap the alcohol. We want the alcohol to stay. And there's all sorts of things that go along with that, which I'm not going to get into. But again, pretty neat stuff. I used to do a lab with my kids, and I don't do it anymore because it's incredibly expensive and the kids weren't very adventurous, is you can actually use alcohol fermentation to make root beer, okay, and ginger ale. The lab I would do is that I would give the kids water, sugar, and root beer extract and yeast, and they would put the yeast and the sugar and the root beer extract into a bottle, shake it all up, and then put it in a dark place. And actually, it would sit for a couple of days, and my baby's crying. Oh, goodness. Sorry. They let it sit for a few days, and then I would have them open it up and taste it. And it's actually carbonated, which is kind of cool. But what sucked about it also is that I would have to go around and taste everybody's root beer because I was scared that it would produce too much alcohol. So I wanted to taste it to make sure that it didn't taste like alcohol. And if it didn't, then I would let you guys drink it. But a lot of kids didn't drink it. So I decided not to do that lab anymore. If you guys are interested in making root beer, you should just Google it. Say making homemade root beer, and it's basically alcohol fermentation. Pretty cool. Okay. Now I have a very not so good, it's a hilarious video. I call it the drunk monkey. Although it says funny drunk animals. What's happening here is this is actually going to show you animals that got affected by alcohol fermentation. There's a fruit tree that they all go and eat fruit from. If you guys have ever had a fruit sit around for a long time on the counter and then smelled it, it actually smells like alcohol. And that's because, again, a lot of the simpler organisms inside of there are breaking down those sugars and converting it into alcohol. Well, all the fruit fell off of this particular tree, and these animals come around and eat it. And alcohol fermentation starts to take place inside of them, and actually it had already in some of the fruit. And so they're drunk. And it's a little inappropriate, but again, it makes me kind of happy. Okay, so this is the drunk monkey.
The only excitement in their lives comes in high summer when the marula trees are in full fruit. At first, the marulas are very tasty and hard to get at. You have to be either agile or strong to get your share.
Sorry, it's so old. What happened? What are you doing? What is this?
The only excitement in their lives comes in high summer when the marula trees are in full fruit.
Take two.
At first, the marulas are very tasty and hard to get at. You have to be either agile or strong to get your share.
Yeah.
But after a few weeks, the marulas get overripe and they start dropping from the trees. Then all the animals wade in and gorge themselves on the rotting fruit.
Uh-oh.
It starts fermenting in their tummies and turns into a very potent brew. So on the way home, things start happening to them.
Can you imagine seeing these things? So bad. Nice, right? Good stuff, good stuff, good quality stuff. All right, so that's that, okay? Now, what you guys are about to work on is that you guys are about to do another diagram, okay? I know that some of you guys are like, oh my God, I don't want to draw anymore, but probably some of other ones are pretty excited about it. I always try to cater to all my different learning styles. But this one's going to be pretty much the same thing, except we can't finish it, all right? So Ms. Hartstock will hand this out to you guys here in a second. I'm just going to briefly explain. You have the same thing. You're going to write the summative equation, and I'm going to have you guys draw header trough, okay? And if you guys notice, I picked an elephant. Again, you could go into clip art and then type in, think of your favorite animal and go, since we just saw monkeys, how about clip art, monkey, okay? And here, go to images, and you'll see easy monkeys to draw, okay? I don't care what animal you choose. It doesn't matter, okay? And it's going to be basically pretty much the exact same drill. So you're going to draw a big picture of that. I want you to do a zoom window for a mitochondria, okay? Now, we haven't actually talked about that yet, so I don't want you to do that just yet, okay? So JK, crap, I'm sorry, Miss Hartstock. Let's do 1 and 2, okay, and 4. 1 and 2 and 4, okay? So you're going to draw your header trough, and then actually you're going to do anaerobic respiration. And actually, guys, you can just draw it coming straight out from your header trough, all right? And all you got to simply do is just show me glucose being broken down into pyruvate with an ATP, okay? Now notice up here I say leave out the process of fermentation. So you know in your notes how you had these two sides going on here. I don't care about that. Imagine that this was gone. Whoa, okay? And this is what you drew. And then imagine your notes right here, okay? That's basically all that you have to do. Pretty simple, okay? You have to describe what's going on. Again, remember to use your own words. Do not write mine word for word. Trust me, I know when you're using my words because I wrote them, okay? And so again, we're just going to do 1, 2, and 4, okay? She's also going to give you a study guide that you guys can get started on. This first part of this diagram is pretty easy. Get to work on that study guide, and that's that, okay? Again, I hope all is well. Keep on keeping on, you guys, and I'll have another video for you tomorrow, okay? I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.